The American dream is dead. They say a wall is medieval. Well, so is a wheel.
I see the disinfectant by injection inside, almost a cleaning.
As you take a shower, the water doesn't come out. So what do? You just stand there longer, or you take a shower longer? Because my hair, I don't know about you, but it has to be perfect.
There's nobody that understands the horror of nuclear better than me.
I'm a very stable genius.
Hold still, Donnie.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Well, we do.
Bing, 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 bing.
Rudy G. Rudy G. You are needed at the front desk for evaluation.
Labor Day is the start of the final stretch of the campaign season. Today, both vice presidential candidates were in the state of Wisconsin. Vice President Mike Pence held a campaign event there where he delivered remarks on the economy. Senator Kamala Harris is in Milwaukee right now and is expected to deliver remarks soon at the end of a roundtable event. The stops in Wisconsin highlight the importance of the battleground state, where Donald Trump won by less than 1% in 2016. That was less than 23,000 votes. Here with more on the state of that state's race, 57 days out, is MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki, who's at the big board. I know you got the general election average, Steve, but I hope you're going to tell me a little bit more about these battleground states, including Wisconsin, which Donald Trump barely won.
Yeah, I figured we start here because let's work our way from sort of the 30,000-foot view down to Wisconsin and other states like it. I say this because the national polling right now shows, and you can see it here, about a 7-point lead for Joe Biden. One thing I think to keep in mind when you see this number now, and as you see it over the next few months, of course, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by a couple of points in 2016, but Trump won the Electoral College. What that means is, when you see a national poll at about a 7-point lead for Biden, you can expect that the key swing states are going to be a tick or two closer than that. So you go from that 7-point advantage for Biden nationally right now. This is what the swing states look like right now. And you can see, look, these were 6 states that Trump won in 2016 by varying margins. They are 6 states where Biden in the polling right now leads. And you can see his average lead in these states. It varies, but in each one of those states, it is a point, 2 points, several points, I should say, closer than the national average. So that's a dynamic to keep in mind as you look at swing state polling in the weeks and in the 2 months ahead right now. We mentioned Wisconsin. It's one of those 3 states where it was a fraction of a point. 3 states where Trump won by less than 1. 3 states that hadn't gone for a Republican since the 1980s. 3 states, obviously, the Democrats think they like their prospects in. Look closely at Wisconsin because that's the one, not just where those candidates are today, but that's the one where the Trump campaign has been saying between the Republican convention, the events on the ground in Kenosha, the Trump focus on law and order, that's the one they think they can get movement in. That's the one they thought they would have movement in right now. Here's the CBS YouGov poll in Wisconsin before the conventions, before Kenosha. The margin for Biden in that poll was 6 points. Now they're out with a new poll. So we have the same pollster right before the convention in Wisconsin, before Kenosha in Wisconsin, 6, and now what do you have? 6. So in that poll, unchanged. And you see the average in Wisconsin of all the different polls is basically right around there. That's a troubling sign if you're the Trump campaign because, again, so much talk from the Trump campaign about Wisconsin being sort of ground zero for where their message was going to resonate. What does it mean in terms of the battle for 270? This is where we left things in 2016. Trump wins with 306. Those 3 states where the margin was less than a point in 2016, where the polls right now put Joe Biden up. If those states flip and nothing else changes on this map, you can take a look right here what happens. If Biden flips those 3, he wins 278 if nothing else changes. Katie?
Steve, you're so good that I had a question, but you answered all of my questions as you went through all of that. So, Steve, thank you very much. Such a small margin for the president in 2016. It's not going to take much for Joe Biden to turn it back around if all things stay the same.
In Malmedy, during the Second World War, the Nazis executed prisoners of war by machine gun, leaving them lying in the snow. In the Pacific, Our captured flyboys were beheaded by Japanese soldiers, some of whom even practiced cannibalism on their still warm bodies. In Korea, along the frozen Yalu, their fate was to die of starvation and frostbite. In Vietnam, they were roughly bound arms behind their backs until their shoulders dislocated, again and again and again. They've been dragged from the burning remnants of downed helicopters and Humvees in Iraq, and they've fought to their last bullet on Afghanistan mountains before being murdered by radical jihadists. And yet,
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
no, Donald, you're wrong. They are heroes because they were captured. Thought we forgot?
Donald Trump is panicking, finding any excuse to show up in military communities. He knows if elections were held today, he'd lose the military vote in a landslide. 60% of active duty officers disapprove of his presidency because Donald Trump disrespects those who serve.
He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
Our troops are in more danger today because of Donald Trump's betrayals. He abandoned our Kurdish allies in Syria, playing into Russia's hand. He wouldn't stand up for our troops when Putin put bounties on their heads in Afghanistan. His weakness emboldens the enemy. Now, Russia is directly engaging U.S. troops, slamming into our patrols in Syria, intercepting our bombers, and flying their bombers dangerously close to American airspace. Trump's refusal to defend America's national security is dangerous. His refusal to stand up for our troops is humiliating. His threat to deploy active duty troops against American citizens is unconstitutional. So when it comes to the military vote for the next commander-in-chief, Trump's not leading, he's losing.
My stepson was not a loser.
My son is not a loser.
My son, Matthew, is not a loser.
My stepson was not a sucker. Lance Corporal Alexander Scott Arredondo died in Najaf, Iraq in 2004.
My son, Sergeant James Anthony Ayub II, gave his life in Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2010.
Mi hijo, Jesús Alberto Suárez del Solar, y murió en la guerra de Irak.
Honorably serving his country.
That is something Donald Trump will never know.
That's something that Donald Trump will never understand.
My message to Donald Trump is this: you have no right being a commander-in-chief.
Usted no conoce lo que es el sacrificio.
I didn't serve. I haven't served. I had a foot thing, and I had deferment for that.
Mr. Trump said, "You think I'm stupid? I'm not going to Vietnam."
Let's take John McCain. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
The president called former Defense Secretary James Mattis the most overrated general.
Russian intelligence officers offered to pay the Taliban to kill American troops.
President Trump was told about this in March, and he has done nothing.
The president called U.S. service members buried in France losers and suckers.
His visit was scrubbed because the president feared the rain would ruin his hair.
When Senator John McCain died, the president told his senior staff, "We're not going to support that loser's funeral."
We keep people accountable for the way they treat our veterans, and if they don't treat them well, we say, sorry, you're fired, get out.
Midas Touch is responsible for the content of this advertising.
President Trump doubted U.S. intelligence that Russia may have offered bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers.
Today, President Trump's first comment claiming he was totally in the dark. Nobody briefed or told me about the so-called attacks on our troops in Afghanistan by Russians.
I think it's another Russia hoax. This didn't rise to the occasion. I think it's a hoax. I think it's a hoax by the newspapers and the Democrats.
She spoke to the president on speakerphone, surrounded by family and her congresswoman. The president told the fallen soldier's widow that her husband, quote, knew what he signed up for, but I guess it still hurts.
I had a very nice conversation with the woman.
This is a grieving widow. And when she
actually hung up the phone. She looked at me and said, he didn't even know his name.
I did not say what she said.
She was crying. She broke down.
I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
There are just 57 days left in the presidential race, and now the campaigns are getting more intense and more public. Joe Biden moves to defend his polling lead against a campaign of fear and division, while the president continues to hope that inciting more fear and more division will motivate white suburban voters to re-elect him. From the looks of all of the available information, with only 2 months to go, the president is in an increasingly weak position. The New York Times puts it like this: no president has entered Labor Day weekend as such a clear underdog since George Bush in 1992. The U.S. unemployment rate is still at 8.4%. Today, the United States recorded 190,000 deaths from the coronavirus. Let me repeat that: 190,000 dead Americans. There's unrest in cities across the nation over police brutality and racial injustice. And now the president is on defense after a report in The Atlantic late last week that he called Americans who died in battle losers and suckers. Those are the headwinds the president is facing, as a new CBS News YouGov national poll of likely voters has Joe Biden leading Donald Trump 52-42. It might come as no surprise, then, that the president has been trying to recast his handling of the economic damage suffered from the coronavirus and his response to the virus itself. The president held a press conference at the White House today to do just that, but he had some trouble sticking to the facts. He painted an overly rosy picture of the economy, even though just over half of the 22 million total jobs lost between February and April have still not returned. And he struggled to defend himself against accusations that his push for a COVID vaccine is focused more on politics than science.
Your point is that what they're saying is that they're saying it for political purposes.
Yes.
You have asserted repeatedly that a vaccine will be on the market before the election.
No, I didn't say they will. I said by the end of the year.
The same thing that
No, but you're not quoting me accurately. I said that vaccines will be on the market before the end of the year, but they may even be on the market. They may even be developed and fully developed, tested, everything else.
For the record, the president just floated a November 1st delivery date for a vaccine last week. He even said it might come before a very special day earlier in that news conference. Again, that's before Election Day. Meanwhile, Joe Biden made his 7th trip to Pennsylvania since the pandemic, and he also focused on coronavirus, defending himself against accusations that he doesn't want a vaccine because it would hurt his election chances.
I want full transparency on the vaccine. One of the problems is the way he's playing with politics. He said so many things that aren't true. I'm worried if we do have a really good vaccine, people are going to be reluctant to take it. And so he's undermining public confidence. But pray God we have it. If I could get a vaccine tomorrow, I'd do it. If it cost me the election, I'd do it. We need a vaccine. We need it now. As quick as we can get it. We have to listen to the scientists.
In a few moments, Joe Biden will be meeting with AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka at the group's headquarters in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And the Labor Day weekend marks another first for the campaigns. This is the first time both candidates for vice president are on the trail on the same day in the same state. Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris are on opposite ends of Wisconsin, a battleground state increasingly essential to President Trump's electoral map. A CBS News YouGov poll of Wisconsin voters finds Joe Biden ahead of the president, 50-44. The vice president is in La Crosse, a heavily white city at the western edge of the state, and Senator Harris is making her first trip to the battleground state since joining the Democratic ticket. She is expected to speak at a roundtable with black business leaders and pastors in Milwaukee later this hour, We'll bring you those remarks live once they happen. But leading off our discussion this hour are both Robert Gibbs, former press secretary in the Obama administration. He's an MSNBC political analyst, and Christina Greer, associate professor of political science at Fordham University. Both of you, welcome. I noticed in the news conference, and there's a ton to talk to, the president kept saying that his first and only priority is to keep Americans safe, and that's why he's been touting this vaccine. But at the same time, he's not wearing a mask. He's not social distancing at his rallies. In fact, he's encouraging people not to wear masks. Look at this exchange he had with one of the White House reporters, Jeff Mason, as he tried to ask the president a question just today.
The issue of what happened when you were in France continues to be a story.
You're going to have to take that off, please. Just, you can take it off. How many feet are you away?
I'll speak a lot louder.
Well, if you don't take it off, you're very muffled. So if you would take it off, it would be a lot easier.
I'll just speak a lot louder. Is that better?
It's better, yeah. It's better.
Robert, his actions do not match up with his words. Are Americans seeing this? Are the Americans that will sway the election seeing this?
Well, I think if you look at some of the polling last week, the amount of people that can swing this election and haven't already made up their minds is a tiny, tiny number. But I do think that every time he goes out and tries to demonstrate leadership on something like the coronavirus, something like this happens and it undermines that message. I think these press conferences at the White House have far reached their point of diminishing marginal returns. I think there's very little to be gained, yet he still continues to do it. Jeff Mason, you and I both know him, is probably one of the nicest human beings on the planet. So to get in an argument with Jeff about wearing a mask, it shows you the kind of leader from a public health perspective that Donald Trump has been as president. And it's no wonder that we've seen just a botched attempt at blunting what never had to be the way it is right now.
Even if Jeff Mason was one of the meanest people you have ever come into contact with, still arguing with him over whether to wear a mask is not in the public health. It's not good for anybody to have someone not wear a mask. You should be practicing that social responsibility when you're in public, especially when you're on national television in a public place, to show people that it matters, and the president should be the one helping him do so. Meanwhile, Christina, the vice president, the former vice president, Joe Biden, is out there saying that the president's waving the white flag on COVID, saying that the president is not actually fighting the fight. He isn't living up to his words. Let's listen to this. And I've got a question on the other end.
He has just sort of waved the white flag on dealing with COVID, and all he wants to do is just reopen. But the way he's reopening is causing us to shut down. Look what's happening with schools right now. If you have kids, trying to get them back in school right now, it's pretty tough.
How effective is that dueling imagery? Both the president arguing with Jeff Mason, not wearing a mask himself, those campaign rallies, and then Joe Biden at a socially distant round table wearing a mask the entire time.
Well, I think Joe Biden's showing that he's not only got leadership, but empathy. I mean, keep in mind, this is not just 190,000 plus Americans who have died. This is 190,000 families who have lost someone, 190,000 communities. For those of us who live in New York, next week or later on this week, we're going to solemnly remember what happened on 9/11 when almost 3,000 Americans died. This is a 9/11 happening, on a consistent basis, numbers-wise, and the president is shrugging his shoulders. He's talking about the economy. He's talking about anything but the grieving that so many Americans are going through, not just emotionally because of a virus that didn't need to spread this wide, but also so many families are worried about the financial ramifications, businesses that have been lost, evictions that are coming down the pike, occupations and full jobs that will never come back. So there's widespread failure on so many different levels by the president. And then you have Joe Biden, who's leading by example. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to campaign with masks on. I don't think anyone wants to have social distancing. You and I know about campaigns. It's about pressing the flesh. It's about touching voters and really listening to them and hearing what they have to say. And Joe Biden can't do that. We know that that's where he thrives, but he's doing his best to try and understand the plight of Americans, something that Donald Trump, time and time again has just shown that he can't do, and he's just quite honestly not interested in doing.
So we have the economy that is not good for millions and millions and millions of Americans. We have the virus, which is approaching 200,000 dead. It could get up to 400,000 later this year if mask wearing is disregarded, social distancing disregarded. But then you also have the president playing defense, Robert, on this military story, this story that dropped in The Atlantic, where the president said soldiers who died in war were losers and suckers. It's very detailed. People in the White House have gone on the record to say that it's not true, but that's basically the press shop. The people that were in the story, John Kelly has not come out and said this is not true. We haven't heard anything from General Jim Mattis, who was the president's defense secretary. When you talk about who is swayable in this election, do stories like this turn people? Do they move the needle for those people who are on the fence? Or is it like the John McCain story back in 2015 when the president went after John McCain? Everybody assumed that that was the death knell for his campaign, and he only got stronger after that.
I do think this is troublesome for the president. And as you mentioned, and at that news conference was asked pointedly, had he asked John Kelly to come out and say this was not true? He said he hadn't, and my guess is he hadn't because he doesn't want John Kelly to let the world know what is true. That the quotes in that story sound an awful lot like the president that many Americans have heard. I do think this affects, though, even that small number of people that have yet to make up their minds or are still persuadable, because I think stories like this, when you see the president at a news conference or you see his activities and rhetoric around the last week, I think they see not somebody who is putting chaos in its place. I think they see somebody who's fomenting chaos. I think the Biden campaign loves the fact that what they see is, and they're trying to project a person that looks, talks, and acts presidential versus somebody that doesn't. And you mentioned that YouGov poll with Wisconsin. If you look at the 8 sort of swing state polls that we've seen over the past 4 or 5 days, YouGov, Monmouth, Quinnipiac, and Fox, there are 8 polls in 5 swing states. All 5 of those states Donald Trump won in 2016. He's currently leading in none of them. His average is 44%. He's polling under his 2016 result in every one of them. And Joe Biden is polling above what Hillary Clinton got in every one of them. So the president is in a terrible position with 8 weeks to go.
Robert, but there's going to be a lot of people out there who will say, hey, the polls didn't show him winning in 2016. Why should we rely on these polls right now, 2 months before the election?
And look, everybody's going to have 2016 flashbacks until the vote's in 2020, and those that want a different result see it. I would say Joe Biden's polling at a different level than Hillary Clinton got in those states. So he's showing and demonstrating a stronger candidacy than the one that Hillary Clinton had just 4 years ago. Undoubtedly, we've still got some big moments left in this campaign. 3 weeks from tomorrow will be the first presidential debate. It will be a big debate. Undoubtedly, and probably maybe bigger than we've seen in a while in presidential contests, because we just haven't had the churning day-to-day of a political campaign because of this pandemic. So there's definitely twists and turns to go. But, if you're one of the campaigns right now, you'd rather be where Joe Biden is. And shockingly, maybe the New York Times, maybe the biggest thing we haven't talked about is the New York Times talking about the Trump campaign having money problems. This was, just a few months ago, everyone thought Joe Biden wouldn't have the money, and Donald Trump had more money than he knew what to do with. Now they seem to be cutting TV because they don't have that money. It just shows you the relative strengths and weaknesses.
You beat me to that question, which was, how much does money matter at this point? How much does television campaigning matter at this point in the race, especially since we're in a pandemic and you can't do, as Christina was saying, that glad handing that campaigns normally rely on?
Well, it does mean a lot. It means you're able to project a message in a place that you may not be every day, on a newscast that you're not on every night. So I do think it is important, particularly now, again, when you can't project quite like you used to be able to. And again, I think it is stunning. I mean, Joe Biden raised $365 million last month, which is, that in and of itself is stunning. But it is remarkable that a campaign that was bragging about all of its resources is now cutting television, is now cutting those ads, whether it's on broadcast TV or on digital. It's a stunning development. Money shouldn't matter at this point in a race because everyone should have so much of it that you're just trying to figure out what to spend it on. But it's remarkable if you have a campaign like the president's campaign, literally not advertising in places because of a money crunch.
A word to Senator Obama and his supporters. Despite our differences, much more unites us than divides us. We are fellow Americans, and that's an association that means more to me than any other.
If they're not happy here, they can leave. They can leave, and you know what? Many people won't miss them.
We're dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal and endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights.
They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
In this country, we believe everyone has something to contribute and deserves the opportunity to reach their God-given potential. In the end, it matters less that you can fight. What you fight for is the real test. I fight for Americans. If you find faults with our country, make it a better one.
Defending Democracy Together is responsible for the content of this ad. This election, we have a choice between Donald Trump, who called Americans who died fighting for our country losers and suckers, or Joe Biden.
The generation of soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines who have served and sacrificed for us are the heart and soul, the very spine of this nation. The millions of you who gave service, limb and sometimes life, fulfilling your oath to this nation and to all of us, we owe you. And over 5,700 have made the ultimate sacrifice, including General Kelly's son, who returned home today. 100% of America owes them a thank you. 100% of the nation can and must do something to acknowledge what they have done for us and continue to do this very moment.
Joe Biden respects our troops. Joe Biden loves our country. Joe Biden 2020.